Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant Mum video. Before I fully get into this review today, I just wanted to a little bit of a disclaimer here, and or heads up. Just saying thanks to my friend Michael over at the YouTube channel Nerd Central, who is currently, if any of you guys are interested, doing a Doctor Who sort of audio series. He's writing the stories predominantly. I wrote one. I haven't fully written it, but we're collaborating on a story, as some other people they're doing some stories for him and that, so for his series. So he was nice enough when I was last at his, almost recently at his, which was yesterday of this recording. He was nice enough to let me borrow this Big Finish audio, as well as another Big Finish audio that I will probably be reviewing soon. So yeah, so thanks for that, man. But yeah, the Big Finish audio that I'm reviewing here today, of course, is the Gallifrey Intervention Earth. Gallifrey Intervention Earth. So yeah, on the front it says "From the World of Doctor Who," because this is from the Gallifrey series, which is a series that prior to listening to this one I haven't been exposed to at all. But yeah, I'll go through the packaging first, and all the cover even. You've got the planet Earth, or what I want to say is Earth, a black hole, Omega. What I want to say is, or who I want to say is Romana currently, which is weird because to me, Romana's always only been Lalla Ward or Mary Tam or Lalla Ward, so that was a bit odd. This guy, who might be Rex, I think his name's Rex, and then obviously Ace, looking badass there. The Gallifrey logo and all Gallifrey there, which looks pretty badass. Big Finish up there. Then on the spine, Doctor Who not Doctor Who, the Seal of Rassilon, Gallifrey Intervention Earth, and then a 7. No idea why there's a number 7 there. Big Finish audio, or Big Finish even at the bottom. Again, Seal of Rassilon in the background, the cast list, the synopsis, the runtime, all that funky jazz. Inside you got the cast list again, or production credits even, and then just the discs and an advertisement for another release of sorts. But yeah. So yeah, I think for new listeners to the Gallifrey series, I think this is probably a really good jumping on point. But the irony is that I didn't reckon too much to the story. It was okay. That's the only sort of word that sort of keeps popping into my head when I think about this story, that it's just okay. It's not, I don't know, like, I think for me it was a bit too, well, I don't want to say complex, but there was too many sort of ideas and not enough explanations, and there was too much sort of too many characters, definitely, for sure. I think the first part was probably the most engaged I was with the story. I kept petering in and out of the story as well, like my interest sort of faded in and out of said story. For a story that's the return of Mr. Omega, who's a big sort of formidable Time Lord enemy, and or big formidable enemy in the Doctor Who universe, full stop. His return is fairly meh. Like, it's underwhelming, definitely. It fell flat for me. It was such a shame as well, because I assumed that it would be grandiose. I assumed that it would be handled really well, but it wasn't. And I hate saying that, because I adore Omega as a character, even if we've only seen him in the 3 Doctors and a Pete Davison story that I haven't seen and I don't really want to see, considering his redesign's fucking abysmal. And that, so at least they get the design right. Granted, it's a non-visual medium, so I don't get to see him there. But, and that's another thing, like, spoiler alert here, but in the context of the story, it makes sense that he ends up taking possession of another Time Lord, but in doing so, I felt like he lost that sort of raspy and awesome voice he had when he was that sort of Omega, and that he took on more of a sort of less authoritative, less sort of raspy, sort of Omega-esque voice. Like, Omega's voice is one of his most distinctive characteristics to me, and you lose that, you lose the whole thing for me in terms of his characterization, really. His motives, I want to say, were not that clear. I think it was literally just to get back power over the Time Lords. The ending to this story was just confusing. Like, it just sort of ends, but he's still sort of out there, I think. Like, they don't actually defeat him, I don't think. I mean, unless I misunderstood the story completely and he is defeated somehow. Sophie Aldred, on a more positive note, as Ace, is just phenomenal in the first part. And maybe that's on a subconscious level why I adore the first part so much, or why I was most engaged with the first part. Because she's predominantly in there, and or in that sort of part of the story the most. And then parts 2 and 3, she's barely in it at all. Part 4, she's sort of just randomly... Well, I think it's the end of part 3, she randomly pops up out of nowhere. And then in part 4, she's there. And it was super confusing, because I'll be honest, after part 1, I was like, okay... into part 2 and 3, where the hell's Ace? Like, what happened to her? So, basically, the best way of describing this story for someone who hasn't listened to it is that, imagine James Bond and or 007 done in the Doctor Who universe, set on Gallifrey. That's basically what this story was. It was a lot of spy espionage stuff, which sounds fun, but I've never been a massive fan of those sorts of things, because surprisingly enough, I find them challenging to keep up with, or challenging to know what's happening. Because understandably so, the stories are not as black and white as other stories, because obviously it's very much about traitors and potentially terrorism, or just, you know, people fighting against you and against the organisation that you stand for, and the government maybe potentially, or do you know what I mean? But they do it because they think that they're, you know, doing the right thing, so on and so forth. But the thing is, it's like, well, understandably so, again, these people always are like, oh my god, is this person actually working against me? Blah, blah, blah. So-and-so, the Time Lord Society, blah, 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 and all that. And then, you know, and then you proceed to a part where, you know, people are shooting at the president or trying to, you know, assassinate her, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, the James Bond equivalent is sometimes in those films, for me anyway, whenever I've sort of glanced over them and or tried to watch them in the past, what's happened usually is that, you know, there'll be loads of spy espionage stuff of people being all like, oh my god, the Agent 70-something has entered the building, oh my god, that's the target, or whatever. And I'm super confused as to what they're on about, and then the next scene will be like just a giant explosion, and it's like, okay, great, but great, that looks cool, and it's a cool set piece, but I have no idea the rhyme and reason as to what's happening and why it's happening. And if you're not able to process and or understand what's happening in the context of a story, then you're less inclined to be engaged with it. That's just common sense, really. You know, if someone's trying to tell you a story, like one of your friends or your parents are trying to tell you a story or something, but they don't do it in a way that makes sense to you, or you have no real sort of understanding of it, then you're going to be disengaged with it in terms of the story that they're telling you, because it's not making sense to you, and that, surprisingly enough, makes people disengaged, as I say, with storytelling, which is what I found here, which is, again, such a shame. I mean, all the actors, besides the whole Omega thing, I think the rest of the actors were stellar. You know, the person who played Romana, my god, was she really good. I don't know her name off the top of my head, or at all, really. I'm just confused, though, now. Does that mean that there's 3 Romanas? Was this Romana already in the Gallifrey series, or in any sort of previous Big Finish release? You know, because, again, to my limited understanding, Romana was literally just... the first Romana was Mary Tam's Romana, then Lalla Ward, and then, hypothetically, maybe this Romana? I don't know. And again, it opens up really well. I love the first part. It's just parts 2 to 4 that are a bit lackluster, unfortunately. I mean, it feels more like a modern series Doctor Who episode, if that's a good thing, because again, I think that makes it more accessible, more of a jumping on point for new listeners to Big Finish as a whole, maybe, potentially. But then again, it is very sort of uber character driven and very much about all these different characters, and there are a lot of them. So more than likely, if you've only just watched, like, say, I don't know, the Peter Capaldi run, then more than likely you might find this a bit jarring, because there are quite a lot of characters, quite a lot of stuff to sort of get your head around, and each part seemed to be in different places and that, so not only was there a lot of people, but there was lots of different location hopping, which, surprisingly enough, I'm not a massive fan of. I mean, for some stories it works, and, you know, it depends on the severity of how much you're changing the location of sorts, because, like, City of Death, for example, as a example that comes to mind, yeah, there are different places they go to, but they're always in Paris predominantly, and the only other real place that I can think of are, like, the art gallery, but do you know what I mean? It all interlinks, it interweaves to the story to tell the story well, and the only other sort of place that I can think of off the top of my head that they would go to is maybe the beginning of the Earth, really, and that to stop the Jaggeroth and that. But besides that, again, most of it makes sense though, or is very sort of clearly ironed out as to why they're doing what they're doing and why they're going where they're going. In City of Death, here less so, which again is a shame. So for me, unfortunately, I would give this story just a 6 out of 10. It's one of the weaker stories that I've listened to so far, which is such a shame, because again, I really wanted Omega's return to be really big and grandiose and epic, and it was a little bit lackluster. I'm hoping, obviously, the Time War box set's an improvement over this. The Gallifrey Volume 1 Time War box set, I think it's called, the official title. I only say that, and I'll mention it, because apparently my mum ordered that for me for my birthday, but obviously it didn't come on my birthday, because obviously it just releases this month, not specifically on my birthday, unfortunately. So, but I should hopefully be getting that box set then this month, so hopefully that, as I say, is an improvement over this one. But this is, before that box set, is the most, obviously, up-to-date and or most current release in the Gallifrey series, so until, obviously, that box set comes out. So whether or not that would probably be the better one to pick up, obviously, remains to be seen, seeing as it's not released yet. But yeah, a 6 out of 10 for me, unfortunately. Thanks for watching, comment, rate, and subscribe.